But when I'm someone's therapist, like I take that so seriously. Like obviously there's ethics there, and I'm like, you have to put this to the side, and I can be with the person. I can really see what it is. And I'm like, be with them, stay present with what's happening. And they move through it, and it's a corrective healing experience for them because they've been able to give feedback, and it's been held in a way where I didn't react, which is usually what we're all doing.
Welcome to the Conscious Leadership Podcast, where soulful entrepreneurship and holistic mind-body wellness meet to help you heal, discover your soul's purpose, and change the world. I'm your host, Gabby Ortega, entrepreneur, psychology expert, social media maven, and soulful leadership coach. And it's my mission to empower you into becoming the light leader you're meant to be. Each episode will be diving deep into topics that will help you gain personal mastery over your healing and mind-body wellness, while also giving you practical tips and tools to help you create, market, and scale a heart-centered business around your soul's purpose and life mission. Whether you're in the beginning of your self-awakening journey or a seasoned inner work god or goddess who's ready to step into their leadership as a soulpreneur, this is going to be your new favorite place to be. We know that you don't just want to feel happier and more fulfilled, but you want to deeply know yourself and powerfully step into your life's purpose while creating massive abundance around your mission. That's why I've created this podcast for you, the light leader of the next generation. Welcome home. I'm so glad you're here. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Gabby Ortega, and I am so thrilled to have one of my dear friends here with us today, Kate Bandman. She is like a healer of many kinds. She's a mentor, hypnotherapist, and a clinical counselor, and she helps women transcend limiting beliefs, anchor into their purpose, and expand their capacity for joy and abundance. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's nice to be chatting with you.
I'm so excited because you guys, like I recorded an episode with Kate, like, oh my God, like a year ago or something. And when it was like right in the beginning, and when I went to go edit it, it was like totally, completely disrupted. Like something had happened to the file. It was like all messed up. And I was so sad. And then the universe, like it always does, has perfect timing. And now we're back at a perfect kind of moment to really dive into a topic that, you know, I'm putting myself on the hot seat here. It's like a little spicy for me. It's a little bit, touching on some things that are happening in my own life. But I feel like that makes it even more relevant. And I know for you guys who have been tuning in, who follow me on Instagram, there's been some things going on with my family, and I'm healing from CPTSD and have been for a while now because of narcissistic abuse and, covert narcissism in my family that, unfortunately was wrapped into mental illness that my father was dealing with, and recently had to cut him off again, go no contact, because for my own sanity and my own safety, really, because it has to do with my health and wellness and well-being, I had to kind of make a really hard choice for the second time and just decide to put myself first. And when I shared that, and I'm like nervous to talk about it here because chances are he's listening, and I'm like, Dad, I love you. I know you did the best you could, but, this is like very important for me to share. So, when I posted about that, it blew up. I'll just say that. It blew up. The post went viral. And I got so many messages thanking me for being open and transparent about really kind of like the trauma response I went through when, an event happened last weekend. I feel like it's a couple weekends ago. That's like how it works. I'm like totally disassociated from it now. But really threw me completely back into a full-blown trauma response. I had to then cut him off, and it was just on a day that also a lot of other things were going on, and I had like an emotional meltdown. I'll be totally real with you guys. Like my tools went out the window, my resources went out the window. I reached out for help, and I reached out to my community that was close to me, but for all intents and purposes, like I just fell totally off the healing wagon, went right back into bad behaviors that and not bad, I should say, more like self-harmful behaviors, because I was in such a state of distress. And so first of all, thank you guys so much for your support. I know like you reached out, a lot of people reached out. So thank you guys. But also what I want to do is not stay in the shame or the guilt or in fear of not using my voice. And that's something I did for a really fucking long time. I did not talk about this. I let kind of my father paint this picture of things being great, and I'm no longer like entertaining that anymore. It's 2021, and we are talking about our truth, and we are sharing it, and we are, being vulnerable, because like that's how we heal, and you know that best more than anybody, I think. So, anyway, long intro, not longer than I normally do, but I think I want to give some context to the conversation we're going to have today, because, if anything, I'm talking about my personal experience. I also work with clients who have been in recovery from complex trauma from childhood, and narcissistic parents and toxic parents. And Kate has extensive experience, in her work with clients. So I thought, why not dive into what is this that we're dealing with? How do we go about setting boundaries without feeling guilt and shame? What can we do to really start creating an identity that feels empowered to us and, authentic and aligned with who we truly are? How do we figure that out? Because so much of what happens with toxic family, narcissistic parents is that our identity is really shaped around their belief system that they want us to have. And that is very hard to break, because it almost feels like you're living in an alternative reality. You know what I mean? So I guess, to get started, why don't we just dive into let's talk a little bit about narcissistic parents, narcissistic relationships, and maybe you can shed some light on what you see in that, and what, let's dive in, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it really is like the highest form of rigid dual thinking, limiting beliefs, and then growing up in that environment, being modeled and mentored by people or caregivers who are basically projecting and instilling that on you. And so not only does that create those beliefs within yourself, and we take that on, then as you maybe are evolving and growing up and you encounter some resilience factors, or you go to a school, or you encounter a career opportunity that's pulling you out of that, or you want to stretch it, and then you're being met with that resistance of that narcissistic parent or that narcissistic partner. And because you're in that stage of trying to figure it all out, but they're such a dominant force of you're wrong, or this is how it is, it's very confusing and very, it's so easy to self-abandon, I would say, is the best way. Is this type of relationship, this type of abuse makes it very hard to stay connected to self and to trust ourselves.
Oh my God, that rings so true for me. And I think what I experienced really was this kind of like you said, no, this is how it is. This never happened. This conversation never took place, I never said that to you. And, you think I'm this way, but you're, the other thing he would say sometimes, your mother programmed you to believe this about me. And I'm sitting here I remember these experiences. I remember feeling so scared when he would fly into these rages, and I was home alone with him, and he would take that out on me. And I was 4, 5, 6 years old. Not negating, you guys, we have good experiences with our parents. It's not all or nothing here. And that's what I think also makes it really hard, because I remember such amazing times with my dad, and there are so many wonderful things about him that I love, and things that he did right, and things that he gave me, my creativity, he always told me I could do anything I wanted to do, and he's like, don't worry about being a girl, go into those rooms with all those guys and you tell them what's up, use your voice, and there were a lot of things that I got that were positive from him. And this really was an overshadowing element, was his mental illness that he didn't want to work on. And that was his choice. And kind of navigating that reality is really hard, of kind of how do I have compassion and not let that self-abandonment happen, where, you're so in the, hey, I understand kind of space, that you kind of go, okay, we'll go with that. Well, I don't want to upset you, so we'll just go with that reality. And I remember being a kid and having him say, I mentioned, those things never happen, and this is not how it is. And me just feeling after a while, when you get bullied enough, you just go, fine. Okay. And you decide, okay, I know it's my truth, and you try to hold on to that, but it kind of starts to disappear. And then your brain is funky. It starts to just believe the stuff that, this person's really adamant about. I mean, so adamant about the truth of their version of things, that it's well, yeah, maybe they are right. I don't know.
Totally. Well, I mean, you hear this, people start to feel like they're going crazy,
Yeah.
right? And you're bringing in something important there. Like if you are someone who can hold space, who isn't as like black and white thinking or getting caught up in that duality, particularly people who are helpers, right? Because we tend to empathize. It's like, well, I can understand why someone would see that way, or I can very much appreciate that your vantage point, your viewpoint, your perspective is going to be different than mine. And so we're used to stretching and honoring that. Where it can become unhelpful is like in those places where we are being harmed, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like basically developing that capacity to know where that line is, so that you can say, yes, I can be compassionate and empathize, but I'm not willing to do that in sacrificing like my own well-being. And of course, as a child, we don't have that ability.
Yeah.
And it's not like a shortcoming. It's just not within our abilities as humans at that stage of development at this point, right?
Yeah. And so like one of the things that I totally agree with that. And when we're helpless like that as kids, in many ways, like we need to just be safe and survive and be able to have our needs met. And we're literally biologically programmed to do this, which is why many of us go into the state of kind of a trauma response. We fawn, we people please, we go, okay, all right, keep the peace, and deny self, turn on yourself, lose trust in yourself, lose that connection to your intuition, because you just are now, a chameleon, because that's what you have to be, because you never know what you're going to get with this person. And to be safe and to be loved, you just have to be whatever they want you to be. And so I talk a lot about subconscious programming, and I talk a lot about belief systems. And I know you do a lot of extensive work in this area as well, especially with hypnotherapy. Can you talk a little bit about like how this affects our core belief systems, and perhaps like how that then translates into dysfunction or problems that we experience as adults?
Yeah. I mean, it's really deep seated. I was saying just before we actually started recording that we really don't own any of the beliefs that we have, as much as we like to think we do. And we've, of course, come to be like, I'm Kate, I believe this about the world and this about myself, and this is my identity. And we get really entrenched with it. But when you really get into the space of stripping that all back, stripping that away, where did it come from? Does this actually feel good in my body? Does this actually make sense for me? A lot of what has influenced a lot of the decisions we've made in life, the relationships we've been into, is actually based upon beliefs that are not our own.
Yeah.
That can feel initially daunting, but it's actually really beautiful to know that we have the capacity, we have the ability, the space to pull that all back and be like, let's go on a journey. Let's find out who I really am. I like focusing on the lightness of that, not just the like, oh my gosh, I've been living my whole life programmed in a way that isn't true to me. I mean,
I think like that resonates for me both. Like, I think I initially had that feeling, like I was like, oh my God, like I started learning about all of the subconscious mind and like the belief systems and the track that plays and how it's programmed. And I was like, oh my God, like nothing is real and I can make everything up. And that was so daunting. And then I was like, there is that space of joy where you're like, oh, I get to invent everything again. And I don't have to be stuck here. I don't have to be this person anymore, because like for me, not like that denial of self just grew into just horrible like self-abandonment and self-harm, because like I just was unhappy all the time and hurting myself in different ways. And you talk about relationships. I had a lot of people say that they had tremendous difficulty setting boundaries after growing up in a situation with perhaps parents that didn't allow us to have boundaries, right?
Yes.
Parents, like we are in service of them. We are born to fill some gap that serves them. And whether it's to be their best friend or to be their therapist or to validate their perspective or to absolve them of guilt or shame and like make them feel good about themselves. It's not that they're insidiously thinking this and planning this. This is all unconscious. And by the way, guys, part of the compassionate side to this is it comes from trauma. It comes from extensive childhood trauma that they experience, because we have a lot of generational trauma going on. So I'm not saying it's anybody's fault here, but this is just factual stuff. And we have to get real about it, because like then we can face it and heal it. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going in these cycles of denial and shame and not changing things. So boundaries. What are some like tips or some guidance around maybe like setting boundaries with people like this, and maybe like guilt or shame we may be feeling, after setting a boundary, or maybe that they're like also making us feel if they're guilting us on purpose?
Yes. Yeah. So I guess if I can just almost like set a scenario in mind first before we talk about how to actually do it, because as you were speaking, I just had like this flooding of connecting with my own experiences and clients' experiences of what you were describing, of growing up with that kind of environment of narcissistic abuse or being very controlled or not having the space to be autonomous, right? Or to, any boundaries honored. Then you get into a relationship. And I guess there's like a few ways this typically plays out, is you might end up joining a relationship with someone who's going to play out those dynamics because it's familiar. Or you might actually get into a relationship with someone who would totally respect your healthy boundaries or somewhere along that line. But because we don't know what it's like, we don't have the skills or the practice, and I've seen this very clearly, people will lash out, respond to things that, not that it's not happening, but it's like we actually don't know in our bodies. Our nervous system doesn't know what it's like to have a partner be like, oh, you need some space? Yeah, you got it. No worries. And it feels very foreign. It feels, again, that's the belief, is it's like, it's not even a space of our brain that goes, this is possible, because we've never experienced it. We've never thought it. We've maybe never seen it. And most importantly, we've never felt it. So even if it is available to us, because healthy people do exist, healthy relationships do exist, and we might find ourselves in them, but that's where I find this work comes in, of like, can I actually receive now what I'm saying I want to step into and evolve into? And it is very challenging because, again, we're going to react almost from that default setting, that programming of shutting down. We might not even try because we don't believe it's possible. So we hold everything in. So in terms of tips, that's where the nervous system work is so essential, because we need to be able to think clearly. We need to be able to actually be reacting in the moment, whether it's at work or with a new partner. We need to be responding to what's truly happening, basically not responding to like being yelled at as a child, which is what I think a lot of people are doing. They might be having a conversation with a boss where they're getting some criticism and their body is responding like their dad is like screaming at them.
Yeah. Oh, that's me. And I would go into like full body shakes, any type of minor confrontation, even like, this is so funny now that this is coming up, because my brain is like, let's make connections. Like the other day in one of the Ignite groups, so Kate was in one of our rounds of Ignite previously, Ignite alum, but you know how it is. We have our groups and we share what's going on. And one of our students was pretty triggered from something that had come up about, not feeling seen and heard, feeling disconnected from the group. And so we're like, okay, yeah, let's talk about it. And immediately just my brain went like, it's just, I don't know, it felt like lightning exploded. And I was like, oh my God, like I felt my whole body go into shutdown. I felt myself like clench every muscle. I felt my hands and start to shake, and my heart and my chest space start to vibrate. And my mind just going a million miles an hour of like, what do I do to save this? My business is going to be gone. I hurt somebody. Oh my God, how could you do this? How could you let this happen? Like, and all of this stuff that honestly, Kate, it's been years, like, and ever since this stuff happened with my dad, it feels like all my trauma responses are right under the surface. So she was just very calmly saying, hey, I'm feeling a little unseen and unheard. And my body was like screaming, in anxiety. And it's just like, I totally relate to that feeling. But when it was resolved, everything was fine. Nothing was a problem.
Yes.
Her trigger being brought up, and when we processed that as a group, we were able to repair and talk about it. It was really beautiful. And, ultimately nothing is wrong. But in that moment, I had to take so many deep breaths and allow my brain to slow down so that I didn't have to feel like I had to run away from the computer.
Totally. I mean, and what you just described, that is the change happening, right? Like that. And we have those experiences enough times, and we learn to settle our nervous system when we get better at doing it quicker and quicker. And that's the healing. Like as a therapist, I mean, I never, of course, intentionally make my clients mad, but if you're doing good work, you're going to potentially anger them on some level or piss them off or irritate them even.
Yeah.
And I've been in similar positions where sometimes I can feel that personal activation from my own trauma responses. If it goes like, instead of it's like, hey, they're wanting to work through their triggers, to my brain and my body is reacting to, you're bad. You're bad. This is the end of the world.
Why is it like this?
And when I can, because as a therapist, I feel like that pulls me into like the highest level of integrity, because like if it was with a friend, I might collapse more. But when I'm someone's therapist, like I take that so seriously. Like obviously there's ethics there, and I'm like, you have to put this to the side, and I can be with the person. I can really see what it is. And I'm like, be with them, stay present with what's happening. And they move through it, and it's a corrective healing experience for them because they've been able to give feedback, and it's been held in a way where I didn't react, which is usually what we're all doing, right?
We're all triggering each other, and then it's just like no one's actually talking about what needs to get talked about, which usually is not a big deal.
Exactly. And those are them. I walk out of a therapy session like that was on my edge. The person had a corrective experience, and I don't know how to, I mean, sure you can explain it. I don't know that I have words. It's just like, whoa, it's expansive.
Yeah, it's really to me, it feels unexpectedly powerful because it seems like such a simple thing to just say, I see you, I hear you, you're valid, let's talk about it. And for that to be a calm, loving conversation, an empowering conversation, even though like I have to say my mom modeled that for me. So I was very lucky. And I think that's one of the things that made me really resilient, but it's like not a normal, I don't think a typical way of like approaching these kinds of conversations, right? Something also we're taught how to do in school, when we're becoming therapists. But what I've noticed from my clients too is just like profound shifts and subconscious shifts that allow them to do things like set boundaries with ease and grace, which is something I posted about. And someone's like, working on the ease and grace. I was like, it's not always easy and graceful, guys, but like it allows it to be more easy and graceful. And like,
yes,
the more you do it, the more you're basically reprogramming what they programmed into you into something different, which is that I am autonomous. I have my own control. I have the ability to remove myself from anybody or any situation that is not just not serving me, but like abusing me, hurting me, harming me, making me feel less than. Just because they're blood, you guys, does not mean they are entitled to your life, entitled to knowing you, entitled to being around you. Your parents had you, and that's as much as you're responsible for. Like, you are not responsible for making them happy, for like living out their dreams or fantasies. Even if they believe that, you are an autonomous individual human being, and it was their job to love and care for you. And if they use that as a weapon, just know that you can just say, you know what, that was your job. To take care of me, to feed me, to clothe me, to give me as good of an education as you could, to give me the best opportunities I could have. You brought me here. That was your job. I didn't ask to come down here. Okay. So like, at the end of the day, it's tough, but like, remember that you have so much more power than you did as a child now that you're an adult. And you owe it to yourself, to your ancestors, and to your future line to end the cycle. And if that means cutting off those people and letting them know that, you're violating my boundaries, and if you can't learn how to respect that, I, have to take a loving step back for myself. Sometimes that's required. And if we can't do that, it's just going to keep repeating itself. So like the kind of like point I think you're making here too is like, do the damn thing. Like like we always say that, like do the damn thing, because like you have to set the boundary. You have to, stand in your power, even if it feels horrible in your body, because you're rewiring yourself. Show yourself you can do this. And I want to kind of also make a little kind of like side note here. If you're experiencing domestic violence, if you are in a physically dangerous situation where your life safety is threatened, I don't want you setting boundaries with these people. That is not the time to do it. And that's, again, why you want to really work with a professional when you're dealing with recovering from narcissistic abuse or parents or toxic family. Like, it's really important to have these conversations, because there's situations where it's not safe to set a boundary, you guys. And so please, if you feel like you're in an actively dangerous situation, don't don't do these setting boundary exercises.
Yes, context,
Support. Yeah.
context. Yeah,
Seek
yeah.
support and seek help. But if you're just dealing with like people who are driving you fucking crazy and they are not respecting your boundaries and you're telling them, hey, stop doing this, and they keep doing that. And you know, they make you feel guilty and ashamed for having emotional responses to their behavior. Then it's time to really think long and hard about why it is that you feel like they need to be a part of your life, and why it is that they're more important than your happiness. Because that's a for real serious thing you need to think about. Because, you know, if we're not living for ourselves, what are we doing? You know, not in a narcissistic way, but like living in a way that we're living fulfilled lives where we feel happy, where we're doing what feels right for us. And that includes living in a way that we're surrounded by people who love and respect us, not who hurt us, you know?
Totally. I mean, well, so much of what you just said kind of was like sparking different thoughts and tangents for me, but the part around the ease and grace of setting boundaries, like it is an investment, right? It's not like the first time you set a boundary, you feel this instant relief, right? And especially if you've never set a boundary or you've had bad experiences of like, of course, like when you were younger and first tried and it was met with like confrontation, it's going to feel extreme. Like to say that first no, or be like, actually, I can't show up for that, or I can't take this on, or I can't stay late after work, which again, when you hear it on paper, you witness someone else do it, it might seem really small, but it probably is going to feel really extreme for you as you're kind of moving across that continuum. But again, over time, and even probably a few hours later, you're going to be like, oh, wow, my boss actually was cool with that. And I got the day off. That feels really nice. And it starts to accumulate. And I see that with clients. It really is. And this is where the limiting belief comes in, where we kind of, we give ourselves a no, right? We accept the failure. We shut ourselves down because we're perceiving, we know the outcome. And it's that taking that risk that we have to just try, because honestly, more often than not, especially again, now as an adult world, you're going to have a lot of good experiences too, where people will respect your boundaries.
Yeah. And
right?
It's so nice. It's, you
Yeah.
guys, it's nice. And when you experience those relationships, you can never go back. It literally feels so gross in your body to be around other people that like have that energy of like judgment, and they're in their own toxicity and their own like unhealed stuff, and they're like projecting things onto you. Like it suddenly becomes like, I can't even like stand that, because you're surrounded by people who do love and respect who you are and what you need, and show up for you in the way you need. And when you can show yourself that exists, give yourself a chance, like, but because you'll see it does exist. All of a sudden, for me at least, my whole like world changed, and I didn't need those people to validate my life anymore, or to understand me, or to love me for who I am, because I had people who already did that. And I was like, you do you, girl, like, you know, you do you. And you know, best of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a complete paradigm shift, right? Like, you know, in the spiritual community, like I hear like people talk about reality shifting, and I'm going a little off tangent there, but everything changes where it starts to be this dark place. Like you hear people in the very straight face say like, well, people are bad, or people are suck, or people aren't trustworthy. And that's a valid belief when we're thinking about all these past experiences. But when you start to trust yourself, when you start to set boundaries and be confident, you can shift your belief and be like, people are trustworthy because you're more discerning, because you have boundaries that allow you to connect with people where you are safe. And there's healthy attachment. And so you can see how things can really shift, but you have to take that risk, right? Like you have to.
Yeah, and you have to let those people go who aren't going to meet you, and just be okay with that, because that is energetic space that's being taken up from people who could enter your life and take up that space in a more positive, more empowering way.
Absolutely. And so again, that's kind of why it's so important to start surrounding yourself with other people who maybe are there. Again, because it makes sense. It's hard to perceive something that which we don't believe, or if anyone else around us is saying, no, this isn't possible. So start surrounding yourself with people who are embodying or existing from whatever it is you want to move towards. Be mentored by them, do therapy with them, right? And then they can reassure you that like, yes, that's possible. It's possible to wake up and feel like people are loving and trusting. It's possible to have relationships that are loving and trusting. And you're still going to encounter people who are going through their stuff, or you're still going to encounter someone who's triggered. but you're not going to react as intensely again, like we were talking about. We know how to soothe ourselves. So maybe they do push back on a boundary, and sometimes maybe it might feel very direct, but we have a much greater capacity as to how we keep ourselves safe and how we respond.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that was the one thing that when I went back to therapy to kind of deal with the first time I had cut off my father and kind of dealing with all the guilt and shame about that, was just recognizing that I do have that ability to, say that say that I need to protect my space and I need to protect my energy, and that's valid. And it doesn't need an excuse. It doesn't need a because, afterwards, and it doesn't need it doesn't need any kind of preface. It's like, that's just it. Like, you inherently deserve to be safe. You inherently deserve to be in safe spaces around safe people, because that's not the reality of the world necessarily. Even more so, we have to work to create those spaces, but they do exist and you do deserve them. And I encourage you to just put yourself in those spaces or remove yourself from the spaces that aren't. The minute I was like, oh, that's an option, it doesn't have to be a big confrontational battle. Like, listen, you don't have to, the boundary you set can be removing yourself. It doesn't have to be a, hey, you're doing this, it's making me feel this way, I need you to not do this anymore. If you've done that already, or it's not safe to do so, literally you don't even have to say anything. You just go, this is what I said to my dad the other day. I said, you know what, I'm not doing this. And I blocked him on every platform. I blocked his number, I blocked his email, I blocked him on every social media platform. I'm done. Like, that's all it takes. You remove yourself, because you don't need to be in those spaces with those people. You don't need to be in those. It doesn't matter if they're family, they're people, and I always ask my clients who are dealing with this stuff too, like, if this person who is causing you harm and continues to cause you harm, if they were just a random stranger in the grocery store, would you choose to go up to them and start a relationship with them if they were just nobody? If they weren't family? And every single time my client is like, no, I wouldn't. Oh my God, I would never seek out a friendship with this person. I'm like, okay, it's not different. You don't owe anybody your life. You don't owe anybody like your happiness. So please, like, if anything, like, you take away from today, it's like, you have a right to peace.
Totally.
Yeah.
Piggyback
on that, or what?
No, I so agree, because, and I mean, again, it's like, there's so many variants of that. Like, that sometimes is what it comes down to. Some parents might evolve with you, or it's like at a distance, right? But that's at the common denominator is still creating a life where you are inherently deserving of peace. What that looks like is going to be different, where the boundary line lies, because some people are going to be more on board with adapting and growing with you. Some people might not have the capacity, right? So what that looks like is like, there's so many possibilities, right? There's no one way to set a boundary, because I've seen that people who are really desperate to start setting boundaries are like, well, what do boundaries look like? And then they tend to be quite rigid because they're trying to just like apply. So it's right. Yeah.
No,
so that's why I wanted,
like, I went from being like a total like people pleaser doormat to then like being in my rage because I was finally validating my experience. And then the pendulum swung like so far in the other direction. I was like, cut off. And I was like, wait, that's not healthy either. I mean, find that middle.
Totally. But like the piece is the common denominator, and it's a journey, right? We're figuring it out, because I've seen that with clients where and this is more through my experience in like residential, like where they're there for like 30 days, day and night, and we're working on boundaries, and all of a sudden they're like, well, no, that's my boundary. And I'm like, yay. I'm like, well, we're on the path, right? It's
exactly.
It's like, very natural.
It's like, I laugh too, almost like, it's like I get excited when my clients start saying no or start like using their voice. I'm like, oh my God, it's happening. Because it is hard.
Totally. And I was the opposite. I grew up somewhere in an environment where I went more with the aggression. Like, I was very dominating, and like I was sharing and inconsiderate of people as a protection mechanism. So then when I swung to the other side of the pendulum, I went really quiet, stopped saying things. So I had to find my sweet spot coming back from the other side, right? And it's part of the process. We can laugh, and that's how you get there. You got to allow yourself to make mistakes, fumble along till you find what it's like. And when you feel that peace, and when you find that people are also going to be able to still show up for you while you're fumbling along. You don't have to get it right the first time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like not attaching so much shame to it. Like
Yes.
life is hard. The world is a tough place to be. Let's not
Hmm.
make it any harder by making ourselves like our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
I like to think about it like it's a dance and like you're just
Yep.
learning the steps and you just have to be down for like however it looks for you. Focus on what feels good and take it one day at a time, one experience at a time. Tune in. How are you feeling after that experience? Was it good? Was it bad? Do you feel like, is there something happening for you? And then recognizing, was there a boundary that might needed to have been said, or am I lashing out and kind of like being way too on the rigid side and closing everybody off? Is there a way to soften? Where
Yes.
can I soften and feel safe? And do I need to work with somebody to kind of achieve these kinds of things? Because you guys, like, there's one thing, narcissistic abuse in relationships, adult relationships, usually it's because as children we experience that and we seek the same things. So it's all
Yeah.
kind of the same stuff, right? We have to start talking about this. There are so many of us, and I do think it's because, like, and I'm such a history nerd,
Hmm.
I think it's because, we have generations that were raised a certain way and
Yeah.
that, we see so many of I'm in I'm 32, almost 33. And you see people in my parents' generation, they're in, they're older. I'm not going to say but in my parents' generation, you see that generation, a lot of narcissists. And I think that's
Hmm.
because a lot of trauma happened for them because their parents went through the Great Depression, if you were in the United States, and their parents went through so much trauma and then tried their best not to spill it onto their kids. And then they did. And then they got our parents and now there's
Yep.
us. And, so there's like, it's not anybody's fault. This is just what happens. And it's like,
Yeah.
but we do have to talk about it because I think the faster we talk about it, the faster we can all get real and we can heal and do all the things we want to do to get happy because that's what life's
Yes.
about, guys. Like,
Totally.
yeah.
And I think that helps with removing that heaviness, right? Like if we're getting really caught up in like, well, how could I forgive my parents? They did this. And sure, you got to honor those feelings and process it. But it really is, it's like this kind of natural evolutionary process where of course, like the generation or the version before it was not as good as hopefully where we're heading. Right. And so we're just integrating, we're learning. Most people are doing the best they can. Doesn't mean it's always okay, but we learn from that. We grow together, we evolve. And at the end of the day, and this is like kind of that hard truth, is like that's the only choice we really have,
Yeah,
right? Like not accepting that doesn't make it any better.
exactly. No, and I
Yeah.
think, to round it out, it's like you are responsible for your own healing. So if you feel like you've grown up with parents like this, chances are you have some narcissistic qualities or something like
Yep.
going on. I know, look, I'll be real. I do. I have to check myself on a regular basis. Things like me feeling like my partner isn't doing enough. I actually have to go back and in my brain go, what has he done for me today? Oh my God, he did so much for me because my
Yeah.
automatic response is this emotional reaction of like the one thing that he didn't do. I'm like, oh, he's not doing it for me. And it's like, whoa, check that shit because that's part of that old belief system. So it's like being really real with what's happening for you, so you
Yep.
can get out of your own way. Because this
Yep.
stuff, like you guys, this stuff we can move through, we can heal, but we have to, like I said, just be really upfront about it and face it, because otherwise we're gonna just suffer. And I mean, that's fine if that's what you want to do. Like,
That's what you want. Yeah.
eventually people are going to leave you. People are going to
Yeah.
set their own boundaries. People are going to protect themselves and it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And so like the best thing we can do is just get support from people who know what they're doing, coaches, therapists. I obviously went to therapy first because it was like the first time I was diving into it. You want to have
Yeah.
someone who's like in that space, but just get somebody who knows and like get the professional person to support you as you walk through this, so that you can break this cycle because you don't deserve it. You deserve
Yeah.
happiness and peace. And I can tell you from the other side, even though like I still go through my things every once in a
course.
while, like yeah, like none of this would exist. My business, my life, my partner, my like happiness, my joy, my friendships that I have now. I never thought I would have soul family like I have now. And I
Yeah.
never thought anybody would love me or like me for me or respect my needs or my boundaries. And now I have it. And it's literally, I never could have imagined that. So, but it started with me going, like, I want something different, and I'm giving myself
Yeah.
permission for something different.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that you also acknowledge that you have narcissistic qualities, because we all like, if you were modeled that, that's the shadow work piece where we want to be like, I would never be that thing. It caused me, but you probably do. And
Yeah.
it's okay. Same with me. I have like, I related so strongly to what you said about my partner. Like, well, what have you done for me? Check myself real quick all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty, is like, I've found myself in a healthy relationship, and it just keeps me expansive, because I am like, one, I believe I have the capacity and that I'm deserving, but it's like, it's this beautiful container of like constantly evolving and keeping me expansive and open, because I feel that love and I'm not going to let it go very easily. Like, I'm going to keep working through this. Right.
Yes, especially
Yeah.
when like you can get real with where you're getting in your own way, because like there's
Yeah.
take the shame out of it. I think about it like it's information, like we're a computer. We've
Yeah.
been programmed a certain way. Certain things activate certain emotions, certain
Yeah.
like what are they called, like certain sequences activate like certain responses, and like if
Yeah.
we can decode and understand our programming, we don't like shame the computer for having a virus. We're like, oh shit,
Yeah.
like, we gotta fuck that, we gotta go in there and
Yeah.
like program that. I wanted to kind of this stuff to feel that way too, because we got to make it light so we can go in and just do what we need to do, which is heavy. And the shadow work is heavy, and coming around to this place where I can say, yeah, like there are shadow elements like that for me that I have to check, was not easy, and it was driven by like my getting real with myself. And honestly, like what happens, and you'll probably notice in relationships, whether they're romantic, friendships, like boss, coworkers, like anybody in relation to you, you'll blow that stuff up with your own reactions because you're in that reactive state. And like you said, I love this guy, and like I am not letting him go, and I'm not gonna so like I refuse to let that be a pattern that repeats, and for our relationship to be a struggle. And so from my end, I do everything I can to check myself and get real, and just no shame, just kind of like, oh, there it is. Like a shooting star. Oh, there it is. And kind of
totally. And it kind of is that coming full circle of like, that's not you. That's what we're talking about. Like, that's all conditioning. It's not you. So it's kind of interesting that we get all in our shame about it and be like, oh, I'm so terrible. But it's like, that's not you. That's why we've got to work on it. Like, it is this kind of separate thing, right? Like it's a reprogramming that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And release that shame and guilt, guys, because that's what's going to keep you stuck. People are responsible for their own healing. People are responsible for their behavior. If they did not want to be painted as the villain in your story, they shouldn't have acted like one. And that's what I tell everybody, because like villain is a strong word, but like if they don't want to be painted badly in your memoir, they should have acted better. And that is on them. That's not on you. And it's not on you to help them fix it or to see the light. If you're a healer, it's not on you to heal your toxic narcissistic partner or family member. But it's your job to be real and heal yourself, and give yourself an opportunity to seek peace and joy and comfort and safety, because it's there. And it's really delicious. And I don't want to be any other place ever. I don't want to like go, and I don't want to be around any other space that doesn't have that. If I can avoid it.
I love it. I agree.
Yay. So, okay, as we wrap up, this was such a good conversation. I'm so glad. It was totally meant to happen today with us. In your like experience, is there anything that anybody who's listening, let's say they're struggling with maybe setting a boundary with like a toxic narcissistic parent or family member, any like tips or journal prompts or exercises that they can do to start to kind of prepare or to set the boundary?
Yeah. So there's a couple things, and this came up for me when you were speaking about the shame and guilt, so to speak. And again, that usually goes hand in hand when trying to set a boundary. I often ask people to inquire, like when a thought comes up or a response to something comes up, checking in with, does this make this heavier? Is this more likely to keep me stuck and kind of almost paralyzed where I'm at? Or is this going to help give me more motivation, more momentum to move forward? And so I always check in with like, well, the belief that I'm telling myself, the thought that I'm telling myself, is this helping me move closer to the outcome I want? Or is this keeping me stuck and heavy? And if the answer is it's keeping me stuck and heavy, that's a good sign to trust yourself to let it go. It's probably not legitimate. And just a really tangible tip would be, there's lots of information, free resources now, like educate yourself on boundaries. I statements is a game changer. It's something that it's a very simple tip. If you're trying to set a boundary, if you don't know what I statements are, Google it. There's lots of sentence stems. Make sure you're setting your boundaries using I statements, because if you've never set one, you might go in being like, well, you did this, you need to do this for me. And you're like going to be all feeling empowered, but it's not going to work the way you want it to.
Yeah, it's not going to land the way it needs to.
It's not going to land the way it needs to. So delve into helpful communication skills, and I statements are very powerful, that you communicate authentically, but it allows the other person to not get defensive and reactive, so they can actually hear you, so that it becomes a productive conversation. So you can practice scripting it out and rehearsing it, trying with someone else, and titrate, like start small, set a small boundary, right? And then work your way up.
Oh, love that.
Yeah.
And I love the script stuff. Like I write it down what I want to say beforehand. I edit it. I kind of like figure out the best way of putting it. I statements, game changer for me as well. And practicing, this sounds so silly, but practicing in the mirror and actually allowing the muscle memory to form of saying something that you probably have never said, or like very rarely say calmly and with intention, you know? And so it's, I need to have space when you are feeling angry. Like, you know? And it, like, literally you're gonna be like, no. Like your mouth is not gonna know like what to do. So like, rather than wait till the moment when you're triggered or when you're in front of the person, what really helped me too was just practicing every day in the mirror. Like, this is how to say this, and this is, let's get this feeling kind of normal. Because when it did happen, I was able to, like, I don't know where it happened. It was like muscle memory, and it just came out, and I was like, oh my God, that's so great. Like, meanwhile, my brain is freaking out, and I'm like, you know, triggered.
Totally. I love it. And sometimes, you know, what people will find, I've had this experience. I went to quit a job, and I like for weeks put it off. I was like, they're going to be so mad. This is an inconvenient time for them. I'm going to have this confrontational. I'm going to have to defend myself and assert. It was the most supportive conversation I've ever had. I think it was like, I need to quit. And they're like, oh, well, how can we help? When do you want to leave? And so keep that in mind too, that those moments will happen where you're going to prepare. You're going to be like, I'm ready for this. And you won't need it, which is a very good experience.
Like, yes, it's almost like you like get ready for battle, and you put on your arms, get the horse, and you're like, and you're like, I got this. And then they just kind of like open the door, and they're like, yeah, like we got like lunch, like we're hungry. And you're like, oh God, this is way easier than I thought. Which, you know, is the dream, and happens, you know, more often than I thought it would happen, for sure.
Yes.
People are like far less bothered. You know why? Because people got their own shit going on. And that's the other thing. That's the ego being like, you know, or maybe that's the narcissism in me being like, oh, I'm going to like upset this person so much. Bitch, they got so many other things to worry about besides you. So, well, this has been awesome. Thank you, Kate, for being here. If you guys want to go check her out, I will drop all of her information. What is your handle on Instagram? Because I know you have a great community there.
Yes, it's at elevate.integrate.therapy. And I'd love to have new people join. It's a fun space.
Oh my God, she has a great community, you guys. She gives amazing tips. She does hypnotherapy. She's a therapist. And she has so many different wonderful holistic skills. She's also a little woo-woo if you're into that like me. And so definitely recommend her. And if you guys are dealing with healing from narcissistic parents or in narcissistic relationships, come join me. I'm going to be hosting a really wonderful masterclass on July 3rd. It's only $55. So you just go to the link in my bio and you can pay for it right there. It sets up a Google link, Google Calendly event, sends a Zoom link to you, and you'll be all set up. And it's going to be all about the stuff we talked about today, how to identify narcissism in yourself as well, and in the shadow work that we have to do, but mainly really boundaries, dealing with guilt, dealing with shame, how to have people in our lives in a healthy way that are maybe not so healthy themselves, and how to recover from CPTSD, and many of the questions, if you submitted one the other day in my story, we're going to be going over. So I encourage you, go hit that link in bio, come join me for the masterclass. Let's end these toxic cycles together, meet each other, support each other, and get on to the other side, which is full of freedom, joy, abundance, prosperity, like love, health, wellness, and boundaries that feel good, and empowerment. So I can't recommend doing the work enough. And like I said, thank you so much, Kate, for being here and lending us your knowledge and wisdom. And I can't wait to have another conversation very soon.
Yes, thank you so much. It was fun.
All All right. See you soon, guys.
And that's our episode for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us at the Conscious Leadership Podcast. I'm so excited. This next year, 2021, is going to be huge. We have so many guests that are coming on that you are going to love. I'm going to be doing some more solo casts and Om Therapy coaching. We have so many things rolling out for you. Retreats, another round of Ignite starting in May, another one starting at the end of the summer, a mastermind, and so many other things. So be sure to stay tuned with us on Instagram. Follow me at om_therapy_coaching and stay tuned for so much goodness coming up. As always, I would love to hear your feedback. Head over to iTunes and leave us a review, and I would love to give you a free copy of my Subconscious Reprogramming Workbook, and that is absolutely free. Just send me a screenshot of your review and on Instagram, and I will be so happy to send that over as my gift for you. And I am sending you so many hugs, so much love, and I hope that this week you are able to find just a little bit more joy in your life. Have a good one, guys.